The year 1968. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. The U.S. is deep in the midst of social change. The Vietnam War and the numerous protests against it are in full swing. The civil rights movement and the fight for racial equality reaches a turning point, coinciding with the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. Cultural, political, and social changes abound. And in the offices at 254 36th Street in Brooklyn, New York, the management team of Topps, among the many different things I'm sure they were doing at the time, was preparing for the production of the 1968 Topps basketball card set. Now, at this time in 1968, Topps did not own the license to produce NBA cards. While Topps had been the card producer of NBA cards throughout much of the 1950s and were still the baseball card production company of the time, basketball cards just weren't enough of a moneymaker for them in the 1960s, so they didn't want to pay the licensing fees to produce official NBA cards. In fact, no one wanted to pay that fee. Fleer had stopped producing officially licensed NBA cards in the early 60s as well, and for the last several years, no one had the NBA license for producing official licensed cards. If you look through the COMC basketball listings, you'll see this gap between the 1961-62 Fleer set up until the 1969-70 Topps set, with just some random unlicensed stuff in between. Both those sets mentioned there, by the way, are extremely iconic nowadays, with the Wilt Chamberlain rookie card being the highlight of the 61-62 Fleer set, and the Lou Alcindor, aka Kareem Abdul-Jabbar rookie card, highlighting the 1969-70 Topps set. I will eventually make videos about each of those two sets, since they're both so iconic in both basketball history and in the basketball card sense. So be sure to subscribe to the channel if you want to see when those videos do get made, but for now, let's look a little bit more at 1968. Now, in 1968, the Topps team must have been contemplating in quite some depth the possibility of beginning to produce NBA cards once again, something they hadn't done since the 1957-58 release 10 years earlier. And I would assume as a result of these discussions, they decided to produce a test set of basketball cards. The test set they came up with consisted of 22 cards featuring some of the best NBA players of the time, including 17 who are now Hall of Famers. Wilt Chamberlain, Bill Russell, Elgin Baylor, Jerry West, and Oscar Robertson, among others. Whether this test set was meant to eventually be a full-scale release once Topps acquired the NBA license, because the cards do feature the team names and logos, or whether this was just a test to experiment with the possibility of pursuing basketball cards in the future, or whether it was some sort of example set to show to the NBA in their effort to get the NBA license, this seems to be an answer lost to history. Officially, these cards were never released and are considered uncirculated, but at the same time, there is evidence that Topps was preparing to release them, but just never did. Sports card hobbyists didn't even know of the existence of this test set until the early 1990s, when some of them started to pop up here and there on the market. And of the ones that did surface, it seems as if all of them had some connection to one or another Topps executive. I couldn't figure out exactly who or how they gradually started to make their way into the sports card market, but I do find it fascinating that there's a 20+ year gap in between when they were made and when a few of them could first start to be seen, rarely but here and there in the wild. So as would be expected, very few of these have made their way into collectors' hands. To date, only 209 have ever been graded by PSA, and only 2 sets are currently registered as completed in the PSA registry. This set features the first ever basketball cards of Dave DeBusschere, Earl Monroe, Willis Reed, and John Havlicek, though Havlicek's last name was spelled wrong. But since this was not an officially released set, these cards are not considered to be those players' rookie cards. Another interesting thing to note about this set is though it's usually considered to be called the 1968-69 Topps test set, it's probably more accurate to describe it as a 1967-68 set, since it features players with their 1967-68 teams and jerseys. The back of these cards each feature a piece of a puzzle that, if put together, shows an 11-card tall by 2-card wide photo of Wilt Chamberlain. Since these cards rarely show up for sale, it's hard to reliably comp their value on the open market, but there are a few numbers I can share to give you a basic range. A PSA 8 version of the Jerry West card sold on Golden Auctions in May 2022 for $26,400. The PSA website estimates the PSA 8 of the Wilt Chamberlain to be the most valuable of the bunch at $50,000+, while the Bill Russell and the first-year card of John Havlicek in PSA 8 are both estimated at over $20,000 as well. Even in raw condition, iconic names like those will cost a pretty premium, and even some of the lesser known players like the 5 that didn't make the Hall of Fame, Bill Bridges, Jim King, Oddie Smith, Cazzie Russell, and Chet Walker, might still end up going for a lot even in poor condition, because the whole set in general is so rare, and a set chaser would probably be willing to overpay if one popped up for sale, because they pop up for sale so very rarely. Now, I find this set to be a fascinating little piece of basketball card history, and though it's not as well known as some of the more iconic vintage basketball sets out there, like the 48 Bowman, 61-62 Fleer, or 69-70 Top sets for example, for some collectors this set is like the holy grail of vintage basketball sets. With a combination of its interesting historical story, its lineup of many of the most incredibly iconic names in basketball history, and its true rarity, it checks a lot of boxes for the collector in search of something special. I hope you enjoyed this exploration of the 1968 Topps test set. If you know of any other sets or cards that would make for a good exploration video, please do let me know. This particular video was actually made as a result of a recommendation someone made on one of my early historical set videos, so please do let me know if you have any other ideas for sets to feature in a video like this. These sports card history related videos, though they're only a relatively small portion of the sports card videos I put on my channel here, are usually my very favorite ones to make, so hopefully you're enjoying them as well. And if you are, please do hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't. And if you know someone else who would like this video, please do share it with them as well. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.